Do it.
I'm sorry?
I'll do it.
So, yeah, SCP Explained, story and animation. So, yeah, the more stuff we do featuring SCP, the more I am going to, the more interested I am in the Foundation. Well, I've always been interested.
I knew I remembered this from somewhere. I've thought about it the other day because one of the comedy channels I watch actually has a funny Trapped in IKEA horror short.
Oh, no.
And I thought it was from, like, the No Sleep podcast. But no, it actually is. I remember now because I've heard this SCP entry. This is a good one. This is a crazy one.
Well,
I'm excited about this.
Oh, I am too. I'm very excited. I can't wait to see.
It's one of those things when you, like, initially hear the concept, you're like, that sounds dumb. But then you start reading into it and you're like, this is really well done.
Well, yeah. Sometimes the best stories have the silliest setups.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's how it goes.
It's like someone takes a concept that should be silly but turns it into something really cool and serious.
Yeah, absolutely. But SCP-3008, Trapped in IKEA, SCP animation and story. So, for those of you who are not aware, we are making an SCP, or SCP short series, and it will be released for free here on YouTube. We aren't going to do, like, you have to pay $50 just to watch the live stream. No, we're not assholes. We're not certain Pokemon streamers out there. Wink. Yeah, $50 a pack for a pack that has 4 cards in it. Go fuck yourself.
Shots fired at someone who I'm not aware of.
Me and Chad both went off on that guy. Yeah, I don't know if I think I cut that part out of the video because we got very, very heated. And I think that's the most that me and Chad have ever swore on camera. Damn. And that's saying a lot because we don't really censor ourselves on here. I mean, we don't go out of our way to say, like, F-bombs and stuff like that. But, whenever we say stuff, I mean, we don't censor it. But I remembered, and I was just like, if I include this, this video is going to be demonetized. So, just cut it right out. But,
fair enough.
But Trapped in IKEA, SCP-3008. We have let me fix that. Hold on. So, for those of you interested in our Kickstarter or in our SCP short series, we have a Kickstarter down below, and there are rewards and everything like that. We're probably going to do stuff in more detail. The Kickstarter ends on December 2nd, and it's an all or nothing. So, if we raise enough, we'll make it, but if we don't, then that's just the way that it goes. But all right, we have Trapped in IKEA. Let's see what happens. I'm very interested. Let's get into it.
On March 15th, 2011, Martin Sims was wandering down the streets of Carson, California. His clothes were ragged, he was filthy, and gibbering like a madman with a full beard and long, unkempt hair. His body was covered in scars, but he showed no signs of malnutrition. What made Martin's sudden appearance so remarkable? He'd been missing for 3 years. When he was interviewed by police, they asked him where he'd been all this time. They couldn't believe his answer. He'd been trapped in an IKEA since 2008, but this was no ordinary IKEA. This was a dangerous anomaly that would come to be known as SCP-3008. Martin's strange answers in his interview were laughed off by his interviewing officers, who assumed he was either crazy or under the influence of something, but they caught the attention of an SCP Foundation field agent embedded in the precinct. The report was passed up the chain to a local site director who approved a detachment of Foundation field operatives to look into Martin's case. While he was reluctant to lead the Foundation agents back to the offending IKEA, the Foundation can be extremely persuasive. His screams of, "Please, I'm begging you, don't take me back, don't make me go back," were noted but ultimately disregarded. When the SCP
There it
Foundation
goes.
had triangulated the position of SCP-3008, which was indeed an active IKEA, the entire retail zone was closed and barricaded under the pretense of a severe black mold infestation. Armed Foundation personnel also arrived on the site shortly after, based on Martin's vague statements that there were creatures of some kind inside. Due to his deteriorating mental health, Martin was unable to provide a great deal of lucid information on the specific traits of SCP-3008. But one phrase he kept repeating was bigger on the inside. Once researchers were satisfied that Martin had delivered all the pertinent information he was able to, he was administered Foundation amnestics to erase his memory of the last 3 years and return to his family. A cover story was formulated. Martin had been kidnapped and abused for 3 years by a mentally unbalanced stalker in downtown Carson. He'd been able to escape as said stalker took his own life out of guilt, a suicide that the Foundation expertly fabricated to make their cover story airtight. With the loose end of Martin Sims taken care of, the true observation of SCP-3008 could begin. A base set around the perimeter of the mysterious IKEA kept a 24-hour watch on the building, covering all potential entrances and exits. No exploratory missions had yet been approved by the Foundation Ethics Committee, so they first wanted to perform a week of external observation to see if any of the store's anomalous properties extended beyond the confines of the building. After a week of nothing, it appeared they did not. A local site director approved of the use of 20 disposable Class D personnel to explore the interior of SCP-3008. The D-Class operatives would be split into 4 squads of 5 men, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta Squad. Each would be assigned a different quadrant of the store and would deliver information back to the control team on site via a live audio and video link. 3 of the 4 teams upon entering the store reported nothing out of the ordinary. Neither the audio or video they were sending back indicated anything different from a standard IKEA store, from the flat-pack wardrobes to the Swedish meatballs. Team Delta, however, suddenly began experiencing a scrambled audio and video connection. Shortly after, communication with Team Delta dropped off entirely. They disappeared somewhere inside the store and haven't been seen since, with one notable exception. After the disappearance and the extraction of teams, Foundation researchers classified SCP-3008 as Euclid because its anomalous properties were at least confined to the interior of the store, and even then seemingly not the entire interior. The anomalous area within SCP-3008 became known as SCP-3008-1, and containment appeared to be 100% secure. There was no telling how many people had already gone missing in the store over the years, but the disappearances must be stopped. The Foundation maintained constant surveillance around the perimeter of SCP-3008, but it appeared they could prevent any further incidents by simply preventing other civilians from accessing the IKEA store. Martin's ravings about monsters were assumed to just be the product of delirium, until a surviving member of Delta Team suddenly reappeared. The date was November 3rd, 2011. It was a cold night, a few hours after what would have been closing time if the store were still
So here's where we're probably about to learn some cool things.
active, and 7 months after the extraction teams had disappeared somewhere in the confines of SCP-3008. There had been no anomalous activity outside the store since the perimeter was first secured, and the Foundation researchers hadn't expected that to change until the last surviving member of Delta Team came barging out of the store's entrance. Startled field operatives were amazed to see him again, but they were even more amazed to see what was following him out of the store, repeating the same phrase: "The store is now closed, please exit the building." Despite the fact that the entity chasing the Delta Team survivor was wearing the yellow shirt and blue pants of an IKEA store employee, the being definitely was not human. It was around 7 feet tall with no visible face. The entity had grossly extended limbs, with each arm being around 5 or 6 feet long and ending in a huge oversized hand. The whole process was so sudden that the field agents present at the perimeter weren't able to save the Delta Team survivor, as the entity reached forward with his freakishly long arms, grabbed him and twisted his head off like a child with a doll. The field operatives present drew their weapons and peppered the entity with bullets. It would later be classified as SCP-3008-2. The being appeared to collapse and die from the physical trauma, at which point it and the body of the former Delta Team survivor were taken for an autopsy by Foundation researchers. There were no biological abnormalities of the body of the Delta Team survivor, so it did not appear that the anomalous properties of SCP-3008-1 had any effect on the physiology of its occupants. He was not malnourished despite being missing for months, and the contents of his stomach looked to be half-digested food consistent with the menu of a typical IKEA store restaurant. SCP-3008-2, on the other hand, raised a number of perplexing biological questions. The autopsy revealed that the creature's clothes were actually part of its body, like an additional layer of skin. The creature lacked blood or any kind of vascular system. Even stranger, the entity didn't appear to have bones or internal organs, not even a brain or nervous system. It was a being made entirely of skin all the way to its core. How it was able to move, or even live for that matter, remains a mystery. Though when you work for the SCP Foundation, you learn to accept that some things will always remain unexplained. One thing was certain though, Martin Sims was right about his monsters. After the incident with Delta Team, the Foundation deemed that sending manned explorations into the heart of SCP-3008 was too much of a liability, and planned a series of drone-based reconnaissance missions into the anomaly. The first of these drones experienced connection issues and failed when attempting to venture into the IKEA's anomalous zone. However, after a lengthy period of trial and error, the Foundation was able to establish a more secure connection with its drones, even when deep into the SCP-3008-1 anomalous zone. It was only then that some of the most extraordinary discoveries were made. SCP-3008-1 seemed to break the laws of spatial reality, as the area of the IKEA's interior was at least an order of magnitude larger than its exterior. Just as Martin Sims had said, it was bigger on the inside, but just how much bigger? The Foundation has yet to find evidence of any physical terminators within the store that might indicate SCP-3008-1 has an endpoint, while an area of at least 10 kilometers squared has been uncovered in SCP-3008-1. It could, in theory, be infinite. Laser rangefinder tests, which are normally very reliable, have only given inconclusive results. Interestingly, the anomalous area doesn't have any clear visual differences from the rest of the IKEA store, except that it extends forever. An individual trapped within the confines of SCP-3008-1 wouldn't even realize they've entered an anomalous zone until they tried to locate an exit and leave, at which point they'd find they were already hopelessly lost. The geography of SCP-3008-1 does at least appear to be consistent, so people trapped within are theoretically able to retrace their steps and escape if they haven't already ventured too deep. According to data collected during the drone reconnaissance missions, SCP-3008-2, of which there appear to be a vast population, would wander the stores aimlessly during the day. They are unresponsive to the drone's presence and did not appear to be aggressive. While the physical descriptions of these creatures could vary slightly, they all follow the same overall trend. Clothes consistent with an IKEA uniform, no face, either seemingly too tall or too short, and limbs that are grossly out of proportion with their bodies. As the Foundation began sending drones deeper into SCP-3008-1, they found another incredible discovery. There was an unknown population of humans trapped inside IKEA's anomalous zone, and these people had used the IKEA furniture around them to create entire settlements and towns within the store. There were several of these towns, all of which seemed to cohabitate peacefully. Even Foundation personnel found this development in their research to be truly extraordinary. Since SCP-3008 was first identified, there have been only 14 civilian escapes. Some had been trapped inside for months, others had been in there for years, some far longer than Martin's 3-year stint. While every one of these escapees has eventually been released back to their home, after a liberal application of amnestics and a proper cover story has been devised, the Foundation interviewed each of them extensively first. According to each of these escapees, the people trapped inside the IKEA have built an entirely new society across the various settlements. Contrary to the Lord of the Flies expectations of a group of people isolated and afraid, there's immense cooperation between the trapped civilians. The food in the several IKEA restaurants in SCP-3008-1 mysteriously replenishes while nobody's there, so there's no threat of starving. And the automatic turning on and off of the lights forms as a rudimentary kind of day and night cycle. Nighttime, however, is when things get dangerous, as the SCP-3008-2 entities, which are known to the people inside as the staff, become extremely hostile after dark. Aggressive hordes of the staff swarm the settlements at night, repeating, "This door is now closed, please exit the building." The civilians inside are usually able to repel these attacks with minimal casualties, but the constant war of attrition slowly wears down those inside. The bodies of the creatures also need to be removed from the area after each attack, as the presence of corpses or even parts of corpses has been known to heighten the ferocity of the next night's attack. During the day, the staff return to a docile and unresponsive state, though they'll still defend themselves violently if anyone dares to attack. Over the course of the interviews with the 14 escapees, Foundation researchers were able to answer another of their key questions. How had so many people gone missing in the store for so long without being noticed? But the answer they received only raised many more unsettling queries. According to the escapees, there were people inside the settlements that, despite being otherwise of entirely sound mind and standard intelligence, seemed to lack very common knowledge that even a child should know. For example, some of them weren't aware of the International Space Station orbiting the Earth, or stranger still, the existence of the Statue of Liberty. This led the researchers to a frightening conclusion. SCP-3008-1 may not only be a nexus point of multiple IKEA stores in our dimension, it could be connected to IKEAs in every dimension where IKEAs exist. While it only abducts a handful of people from each store over an extended period of time, it suddenly becomes clear how this SCP was able to trap so many people without detection over such a long period of time, which in turn led to an even more terrifying revelation. The SCP Foundation may not have SCP-3008-1 as contained as they thought. It might even be tucked away in an IKEA store somewhere near you, just waiting for you to visit. After all, there's always room for one more.
Damn.
Kind of creeps you out about wanting to go to IKEA ever again, doesn't it?
I've been to an IKEA once, and I'll say this. Very nice store. But I would not want to be trapped in there.
No.
No, I would not want to be trapped in an IKEA store.
I mean, at least out of all the stores you could be trapped in, it's one that has freaking food that you can actually subsist on, but having to fight against the staff would be pretty spoopy.
That's the scariest part for me, is just like the staff always constantly coming after you at night. It's like, the store is now closed. The store is now closed. And then they rip your head off like...
Honestly, I wouldn't be totally opposed to eventually trying a short film project with this one.
I wouldn't either. But I don't think IKEA would approve of their store being used as a front. Or maybe they would. I don't know. Maybe the owner of IKEA, the chairman of IKEA is an SCP fan.
One way you could potentially get away with it is just to kind of, smudge off the brand from it. Like, use the number so people know what it is, but don't mention the name, like the brand name, and don't show the logo on the side of the building and shit.
Yeah.
And you could maybe get away with it that way. Like, it could be clear that that's what it's based off of to people watching that didn't know the SCP entry, but...
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to have the branding in place so that you won't have to run into the legal ramifications of IKEA being like, why are you using our logo and shit in our store?
Yeah, it's like the SCP-173 and the legal stuff that they had to get into over that one. Mm-hmm. It was the original artist of the creature that's used did not like the fact that the creature was being used for that. Because the person actually had just had a very personal attachment with his original art. But yeah, this one, honestly, this is a very interesting IKEA. IKEA's very interesting SCP, and the IKEA concept, I think, is just something that could be used, and I think it could actually have a lot of. For instance, you could go in there and just be like, wait, who's the president in your universe? Oh, and it's just like, Mitt Romney. Like, wait, what?
Excuse me?
So he won the election in 2012. Oh, 2012? No, he won the election in 2008. What? And then it makes even less sense. It's like, what about Barack Obama? Oh, Barack Obama? Yeah, he ran against Bush in Bush's second term. Wait, so everything's been pushed back or pushed ahead by 4 years in terms of everyone's political a lot? How the hell did that happen? And then you start talking to them as far back as they remember in history. It's just like, when did Reagan come to power? 76. Shit! I thought he was elected in 1980.
Eventually you get to somebody that's just missing or something, though, to make up for the...
Exactly. And then all of a sudden you're just like, wait a second. Do you remember Grover Cleveland? Oh yeah, he was the president. He was the 22nd president. I'm like, don't you mean the 22nd and the 24th? It's like, Wait, 24th? That's it.
He was never reelected.
He was never the only president to be elected non-consecutively.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just... Yep, 24th and 22nd. Ha-ha! I still know my history. God. So anyway, this is an interesting SCP, and I'm going to leave a like on this. Go check out SCP Explained. These guys, that was some great animation and some really good
appreciate the fact that they tell the story in their own way as well, rather than just copying from the entries. Because the details and stuff they gave here are not given in anywhere near the same order as they are when you're hearing the SCP entry or reading the SCP entry.
Yeah.
So I remember I actually heard this one. I didn't read it. It was on SCP Reel to Reel, which is a podcast that reads the entries out loud, like in a tape, book on tape type format.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the first thing they were talking about is what it was, and they go ahead and mention, the staff and stuff like that earlier. But like they kind of made it like their own little story thing by starting with the one guy, the first guy that escaped, and the closing off of the building, and went more in a chronological order with it than the entry itself does. Because the entry itself is like notes on the whole situation overall, so it's not necessarily given in chronological order as much.
Wow.
It was very cool to hear like their take on it, like the way they decided to tell the story of the SCP.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, if you want to check out more from SCP Explained, feel free to click their name in the title of the video. And if you want to see more from us, feel free to check out our Kickstarter down below, which we have our SCP. And hey, SCP Explained, if you want to help, if you want to get in on that, feel free to check it out as well.
Or even just give us a shout out.
Yeah. We're trying to raise the funding for it by December 2nd. That's what we're trying anyway. So, yeah. Anyway, that's going to do it, everyone. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and hopefully we will see you all in the next one. So until then, I'm Nate.
I am Nick.
We'll see you, everybody. Peace out.